The Select Man's Garden. Good evening. Welcome back. Tonight we are in Stillwater Cove, Maine, where the tide comes in, and so do the secrets. Before we begin, if you enjoy what we do here, please like the video and subscribe. Tell us in the comments where you are and what time it is. Now get comfortable, turn off the lights, and let's find out what happened. The January cold had settled into Stillwater Cove like a man who intended to stay. Ice rimmed the harbor pilings, the diner's windows fogged from the inside. Gordon Marsh had been head selectman for 11 years, and in 11 years he had never missed a Saturday morning at Harlow's. He missed the last one. Iris noticed. She did not say anything about it until after they found him. The boots were dry, the coat belonged to someone else, and the garden he had been walking through was empty at midnight, except for the footprints that should not have been there. Chapter 1. The weather he expected. Nora Alcott woke to a cold house and a cat sitting on her chest. Beckett weighed approximately 14 pounds and had no concern for the fragility of human rib cages. He stared at her with the flat expression of a creature who had been waiting for her to wake up for at least 20 minutes and had reached the end of his patience. "The boiler," Nora said. Beckett blinked. She lay still for a moment, cataloging the morning. The air in the cottage had that sharp quality that meant the temperature inside had dropped below 50. Her breath fogged when she exhaled. The radiator in the bedroom, which usually clicked and groaned through the night, was silent. The boiler had been making a sound for 3 weeks, a low hum that Nora had chosen to interpret as character rather than warning. She had mentioned it to the repair service in Rockland before Christmas. They said they would send someone after the holidays. It was now January 12th. Nora sat up. Beckett relocated from her chest to her lap with the dignity of a king changing thrones. "Fine," she said. "You win." She dressed in the dark. The cottage had been her aunt's for 40 years, and it showed every one of them in the floorboards and the windows and the particular draft that came through the kitchen door, no matter how many times Nora adjusted the threshold. She had lived here for 4 years now. She still caught herself expecting to wake up in her Boston apartment, which had been smaller and louder and had heat that worked. The coffee pot took 11 minutes to brew. Nora stood in the kitchen with her hands wrapped around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her palms, and watched the first light come over the harbor through the window above the sink. The harbor was frozen in patches. The lobster boats still went out, the ones with the reinforced hulls, but they moved slower now. January was the month when Stillwater Cove tucked in on itself. The summer people were gone. The art colony was a memory. What remained was the town underneath, the one that had been here for 280 years, the one that did not need tourists to remember its own name. Nora finished her coffee and rinsed the mug. She pulled on her coat and checked the thermostat one more time, as if the boiler might have changed its mind overnight. It had not. Beckett watched her from the warmest corner of the kitchen floor, where the sun would eventually reach by mid-morning. He did not see her off. He never did. He had the confidence of an animal who knew she would come back, because she always did. The drive to the sheriff's office took 7 minutes. Stillwater Cove in January had no traffic to speak of. The roads were salt-streaked and narrow, the snowbanks piled high where the plows had pushed them. The sun was up now, low and pale and not doing much against the cold. Sheriff Roy Gannett's truck was already in the lot when Nora pulled in. This was unusual. Gannett rarely arrived before 9, and it was not quite 8. Nora found him in his office with his feet on his desk, reading the local paper. He looked up when she came in. "Heat's out at your place," he said. "How did you know?" "Your face. You've got that look. Same look my wife gets when I forget to order heating oil. He folded the paper. Call the guy in Rockland. He owes me a favor. I already called him. 3 times. Call him again and mention my name. Nora hung her coat on the rack by the door and sat down at her desk. The sheriff's office was small and drafty, with 2 desks and 1 holding cell that had not held anyone in 6 months. The coffee machine in the corner was older than Nora and smelled faintly of burned rubber. She poured herself a cup anyway. What's on the docket? She said. Gannett shrugged. Town meeting tonight. Selectmen's budget review. Gordon Marsh called yesterday to make sure we'd have someone there in case things got heated. They usually don't. But Gordon likes to be thorough. Gannett put his feet down and reached for his own coffee. You should go. Show the flag. Shake some hands. Remind them we exist. You want me to go to a selectmen's meeting. I want you to sit in the back and not fall asleep. The budget review is the only thing on the agenda. Should be done by 8. Nora wrote it down. She did not particularly want to spend her evening at a selectmen's meeting, but Gannett was not wrong about the value of showing up. The town had a short memory for law enforcement presence. If they did not see Nora, they forgot she was there. Anything else? She said. That's it. Quiet day. Enjoy it while it lasts. Nora spent the morning on paperwork. The department had a backlog of incident reports from the holidays, a break-in at a summer cottage that turned out to be a raccoon, a dispute between neighbors over a property line that had been settled without charges, a tourist who had locked his keys in his car and waited 45 minutes for a locksmith because he did not know Nora could have done it in 3. She worked through the stack methodically. At 11, she drove to Harlow's Diner for lunch. The diner was warmer than the office. Iris Harlow was behind the counter, wiping down the griddle with the rhythm of someone who had done the same motion 30,000 times. She looked up when Nora came in and nodded toward the corner booth. Sit, Iris said. I'll bring it over. Nora sat. The booth had cracked vinyl and a view of Main Street. The window was fogged, but she could see the harbor beyond the buildings, gray and cold and working. Iris arrived with coffee and a plate of... She did not ask what Nora wanted. She never did. The diner operated on a system of long observation and short conversation, and Iris had been observing Nora since Nora was a child. Gordon Marsh was in yesterday, Iris said, filling Nora's cup. Came in for lunch. Sat right where you're sitting. Ordered the meatloaf. Anything unusual? Iris considered the question. She had the quality of someone who stored information in categories she did not explain to anyone else. He asked about the boatyard, she said. The old Fen place. Wanted to know if anyone had been poking around out there. Had anyone... Not that I heard. But Gordon doesn't ask questions he doesn't already know the answer to. Iris set down the coffee pot. That's what I thought was unusual. He asked anyway. Nora filed this. Gordon Marsh had been head selectman for 11 years. He knew everything that happened in Stillwater Cove, or close to it. If he was asking about the boatyard, he had a reason. Anything else? Nora said. Iris wiped down the counter. She did not answer immediately. He looked tired, she said finally. Not sick, just tired. The way a man looks when he's been carrying something for too long and hasn't figured out how to put it down. She walked back to the kitchen before Nora could ask another question. Nora ate her lunch slowly. The diner filled up around her, the usual crowd, the regulars who came every day at the same time and sat in the same seats. Cal Finney was at the counter with a cup of black coffee and a copy of the fishing report. Vera Stout came in for takeout, nodded at Nora, and left without saying a word. Reverend Elaine Marsh sat in the corner with a salad and a book, reading with the focused attention of someone who did not want to be interrupted. Nora finished her plate and left cash on the table. She was halfway to the door when Iris called out from the kitchen. "Tell Gordon I said hello," Iris said. "He's not answering his phone." Nora turned. "When did you try him?" "This morning. Called his house, called his office. Nothing." Iris shrugged. "Probably just busy. But tell him I said hello anyway." Nora nodded and walked out into the cold. She drove past Gordon's house on her way back to the station. It was a white colonial on the edge of town, set back from the road with a long driveway and a garden that Gordon tended himself in the summer. In January, the garden was buried under snow and the house looked closed. His truck was in the driveway. The lights were off. Nora kept driving. She told herself there was nothing to see. A man who did not answer his phone was not a crime scene. He was just busy. But she remembered what Iris had said about the boatyard. And she remembered the way Gordon had looked the last time she saw him. At the Christmas party at the church, standing by the punch bowl with a cup he was not drinking from. She should have noticed something then. She would think about that later. The afternoon was quiet. Nora finished the incident reports and filed them. At 4, Gannett left for the day, and she stayed at her desk, reading through the town's meeting agenda for the evening. The budget review was the only item. Gordon Marsh would present the numbers. The selectmen would argue about them. The meeting would end by 8. Nora left the office at 5:30. She drove home to check on the boiler, which was still not working, and to feed Beckett, who was sitting on the kitchen counter with the expression of a cat who had been abandoned for an unreasonable amount of time. "The repairman is coming tomorrow," Nora told him. Beckett did not believe her. She changed into her uniform and drove to the town hall at 6:45. The parking lot was half full. The budget review drew a crowd, mostly the same people who came to every meeting, the ones who cared about tax rates and road maintenance and the slow machinery of municipal government. Nora found a seat in the back row. Gordon Marsh was at the front table with the other selectmen, going through his papers. He looked the way Iris had described him, tired. Not sick, just tired. The meeting started at 7. Gordon stood and read the budget numbers in a voice that was steady but quiet. He did not look up from his notes. He did not make eye contact with anyone in the room. Nora watched him for the full 45 minutes. She watched his hands, which were steady. She watched his eyes, which were not. At 7:50, Gordon closed his folder and sat down. The selectmen opened the floor for questions. There were none. The meeting adjourned at 8 on the dot. Nora stood to leave. Gordon was already walking out the side door, his coat over his arm, moving faster than a man his age usually moved. She almost followed him. She almost called out his name. She did not. She drove home and found Beckett on the couch, in the dark, in the cold. The boiler had not fixed itself. The temperature inside the cottage had dropped to 42 degrees. Nora built a fire in the fireplace and sat on the floor in front of it. Beckett joined her after a few minutes, settling into her lap with the weight of a creature who was making a temporary exception to his usual policy of indifference. She thought about Gordon Marsh. She thought about the way he had not looked up from his notes. She thought about the coat over his arm, which was not the coat he always wore. She should have followed him. The fire burned down. Beckett fell asleep. Nora stayed awake, watching the flames, until the house was warm enough to sleep. In the morning, they found Gordon Marsh on the path between his house and the town hall. He had made it 200 yards before he went down. His boots were dry, his coat was wrong, and the storm that had been forecast had arrived exactly on time. Nora's phone rang at 5:45. It was Cal Finney's nephew, who did salvage work and who had been driving to the harbor before dawn. "You better come," he said. "It's Gordon. He's in the garden." Nora dressed in the dark and drove to the path behind Gordon's house. The sun was not up yet. The cold was worse than it had been the day before, and the wind had picked up overnight. The body was exactly where the nephew had said it would be. Gordon Marsh lay face down in the snow, his arms at his sides, his legs straight. He looked like a man who had lain down to rest and simply not gotten up. But his boots were dry. That was the first thing Nora noticed. The path was wet from the storm, slushy and frozen in patches, and Gordon had walked at least 200 yards. His boots should have been wet. They were not. And his coat. Gordon had worn the same heavy wool coat for as long as anyone could remember. The coat on his body was similar, but not identical. The collar was wrong. The stitching was different. Nora knelt in the snow and looked at Gordon's face. His eyes were closed. His expression was peaceful. Which meant nothing. The cold did that. It smoothed out the evidence of struggle. She stood up and called Gannett. "Gordon Marsh is dead," she said. "Exposure. Maybe I need the medical examiner." Gannett was silent for a moment. "I'll call it in," he said. "You stay there. Don't let anyone near the body." Nora hung up and looked at the path. The footprints were there. Gordon's, leading from his house to the spot where he had fallen. But there were other prints, too. Fainter. Older. Someone had been here before the storm. She counted 3 sets of Gordon's, one that came from the direction of the town hall and stopped 50 feet short, and one that came from the woods behind the garden and disappeared back into them. Gordon Marsh had not been alone in the garden last night. Nora pulled out her notebook and started writing. The sun was coming up now, pale and useless, and the wind was picking up again. She tucked her hands into her pockets and waited for the medical examiner to arrive. The garden was quiet. The snow was falling again, light and persistent. By noon, the footprints would be gone. But Nora had already seen them, and she had already started counting. Chapter 2. The boots were dry. The medical examiner arrived at 7:15. Dr. Leo Franks was a thin man in his 60s who had been doing this work for 30 years and had long since stopped being surprised by anything. He knelt in the snow beside Gordon Marsh's body and went through his routine with the efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Nora stood back and let him work. "Core temperature is consistent with exposure," Franks said, not looking up. "But I won't know more until I get him on the table." "His boots," Nora said. Franks lifted one of Gordon's feet and examined the sole. The leather was dry. The treads were packed with snow, but not wet through. "He didn't walk through slush," Franks said, "which means either he came out after the ground froze solid, or he didn't walk here at all." "There are footprints." "Then he came out after the ground froze." Franks stood up and brushed snow from his knees. "But that doesn't explain the coat." Nora looked at Gordon's coat again. The wool was dark gray, heavy, well made, but it was not Gordon's coat. His wife would confirm that, once someone told her. "Someone switched it," Nora said. "Or he grabbed the wrong one in the dark." Franks shrugged. "People do strange things when they're cold and tired." Gordon Marsh was not the kind of man who grabbed the wrong coat. He was the kind of man who planned his wardrobe for the week on Sunday afternoon. Nora knew this because Iris had told her once, in passing, during a conversation about nothing. Iris noticed everything. "Get him to the lab," Nora said. "Call me when you have something." Franks nodded. His assistants arrived with the stretcher and loaded Gordon's body onto it with the careful efficiency of men who had done this too many times to count. Nora walked the path again. Gordon's house was at one end, a white colonial with blue shutters and a porch that wrapped around the side. The town hall was at the other end, 300 yards away, its roof visible above the trees. The path connected them. a shortcut that Gordon had used for 11 years. She measured the distance in her head, 300 yards. At a normal walking pace, 5 minutes. In a storm, maybe 8 or 9. Gordon had made it 200 yards. He had been close to the halfway point when he went down. She looked at the footprints again. Gordon's were clear, distinct, heading from the house toward the town hall. The set from the town hall was fainter, older, ending 50 feet before Gordon's body. Someone had walked from the town hall toward the house, then turned around and gone back. The set from the woods was the strangest. It came from the tree line behind the garden, crossed the path at an angle, and disappeared back into the trees. No stopping, no hesitation, just a straight line across and back. Nora took photographs with her phone. She measured the footprints with the tape measure from her car. Size 11, she guessed. Men's boots. Well worn. The tread pattern was distinctive, a diamond pattern with a deeper groove on the outside edge. She would check that against every pair of boots in Stillwater Cove if she had to. The sun was fully up now, but it did not help. The sky was the color of old pewter, and the snow was falling harder. By noon, the footprints would be gone. Nora walked back to her car and called Gannett. "Where are you?" he said. "The path behind Gordon's house. The medical examiner just left." "Any idea what happened?" "Heart could have given out. Exposure. The cold does things to a man his age." Nora paused. "But his boots were dry. And his coat was wrong." "Wrong how?" "It wasn't his. Someone else's coat. Similar, but not the same." Gannett was quiet for a moment. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "You think someone put him out there?" "I think I need to talk to his wife before I decide what I think." "Then go talk to her. But be careful. Gordon was a public figure. The selectmen are going to be all over this." Nora hung up and drove to Gordon's house. The driveway was empty except for Gordon's truck. The lights were still off. The house looked closed, the way it had looked the day before, but now Nora knew why. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She knocked again, harder. The door opened a few inches. A woman's face appeared in the gap. Margaret Marsh was 63, with gray hair and the kind of face that had been pretty once and was now just tired. "Deputy Alcott," she said. Her voice was flat. "I heard. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Marsh." Margaret opened the door wider and stepped back. "You better come in." The house was warm. The fireplace in the living room was burning, and the kitchen smelled like coffee that had been sitting out for hours. Margaret led Nora to the living room and sat down on the couch. She did not offer Nora a seat, but Nora sat down anyway. "When was the last time you saw your husband?" Nora said. "Last night. He left for the meeting at 6:30. He always left at 6:30. Did he seem different? Unwell? Worried about something?" Margaret looked at the fireplace. The fire crackled and popped. She did not answer for a long time. "He was tired," she said finally. "Tired for weeks. I told him to see a doctor. He said he would after the budget was done." "Did he mention anyone threatening him? Any arguments with the other selectmen?" Margaret laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. "Gordon argued with everyone. That was his job. He said if no one was angry at you, you weren't doing anything important." "But specifically, anyone he was worried about?" Margaret was quiet again. She picked at a thread on her sleeve. "His nephew," she said. "Barry. They had a fight a few weeks ago. Something about money. Gordon didn't tell me the details. He never did. Did Barry threaten him? I don't know. Gordon wouldn't say. Margaret looked at Nora. But he started locking his office door after that. He never used to lock it. Nora wrote this down. Barry Marsh. Gordon's nephew. She knew the name but not the face. Barry lived in Portland, came to Stillwater Cove a few times a year, and had a reputation for being difficult. Can I see your husband's office? Nora said. Margaret stood up without a word and led Nora to the back of the house. The office was small, neat, organized. A desk, a filing cabinet, a bookshelf. The window looked out at the garden and the path beyond it. Nora looked at the desk first. The surface was clean. A pen, a notepad, a cup of cold coffee. The chair was pushed in. Did he keep a safe in here? Margaret nodded toward the bookshelf. Behind the encyclopedias, the ones that don't come off the shelf. Nora crossed to the bookshelf and ran her hand along the spines. The encyclopedias were old, faded, clearly untouched for years. She pulled on one. It did not move. She pulled on another. Same thing. She pressed against the shelf. It swung open on a hidden hinge. Behind it was a wall safe, about a foot square. The door was closed. The lock was engaged. Do you know the combination? Margaret shook her head. Gordon never told me. He said some things were better kept private. Nora looked at the safe. It was a standard model, the kind you could buy at any hardware store. She could crack it with a stethoscope and a few hours of patience. But she did not have a stethoscope, and she did not have a few hours. Did your husband mention any documents he was worried about? Anything he was keeping in here? No, but he went in here a lot in the last few weeks, more than usual. Margaret paused. He would close the door. I could hear him talking to himself sometimes. What did he say? I couldn't make it out. Just his voice, low and steady, like he was reading something. Nora looked at the safe again. Whatever Gordon had been reading, it was still in there. She turned back to Margaret. I'm going to need to search the house. Not today, but soon. I'll get a warrant. Margaret did not argue. She just nodded and walked back to the living room. Nora followed her. At the front door, she turned. One more thing, Nora said. Your husband's coat. The one he usually wore? The heavy wool one. It's in the closet. He didn't take it last night. I thought it was strange, but he was in a hurry. Can I see it? Margaret opened the hall closet and pulled out a dark gray wool coat. Nora held it up. It was heavier than the coat Gordon had been wearing. The collar was wider, the stitching was different. Does this belong to anyone else in the house? No, just Gordon. Nora folded the coat and tucked it under her arm. I need to take this, for comparison. Margaret did not ask what comparison meant. She just closed the closet door and walked away. Nora drove to the station with Gordon's coat in the passenger seat. The morning had warmed slightly, which meant the temperature had risen from 15 to 20. The snow was still falling, light and persistent. Gannett was at his desk when she came in. He looked up from his paper. Anything? His wife says he was tired, argued with his nephew a few weeks ago, started locking his office door. People lock their doors, Nora. Not Gordon. Not for 11 years. Nora hung her coat on the rack. And his boots were dry. Roy, the path was wet. He walked 200 yards. His boots should have been wet. You said the ground was frozen. It froze after the storm. The storm started at 7. The meeting ended at 8. The temperature dropped at 9. If he walked that path any time between 8 and 9, his boots would have been wet. Nora sat down at her desk. So either he walked it after the ground froze, which was after 9, or someone put him there. Or he walked it before the storm and fell after the storm started. That doesn't explain the coat. Gannett put his paper down. What about the coat? It wasn't his. Someone switched it. His coat is heavier, better insulation. Nora pulled the coat from the rack and held it up. This coat is lighter. The collar is wrong. He would have been cold in this coat, cold enough to be distracted. Distracted from what? From whoever was in the garden with him. Gannett was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're going to make me call the selectmen, aren't you? Someone has to tell them their chairman is dead. Fine, I'll do it. Gannett stood up and reached for his coat. But you stay on this, quietly. No one likes a deputy who stirs up trouble before the medical examiner has even filed a report. Nora watched him leave. Then she pulled out her notebook and wrote down everything she had learned. Gordon Marsh, 66. Head selectman for 11 years. Tired for weeks. Argued with his nephew about money. Started locking his office door. Left for a meeting at 6:30. Made it 200 yards. Boots dry, coat wrong, footprints from 3 directions. Someone in the garden. She looked at the list and circled the nephew's name. Barry Marsh. She would find him today. But first, she needed to see the path again, before the snow covered everything. Nora stood up and put on her coat. The station was cold. The boiler in the cottage was cold. Everything was cold. She drove back to the garden and walked the path a second time. The footprints were fainter now, the snow filling them in. She took more photographs, measuring each print, noting each direction. The set from the town hall bothered her the most. Someone had walked from the town hall toward Gordon's house, stopped 50 feet away, and turned back. Why stop? What had they seen? Or who Nora looked at the tree line? The footprints from the woods were almost gone now. Just shallow depressions in the snow. She followed them to the edge of the trees and stopped. Something glinted in the snow. Metal. Small. She knelt down and brushed away the snow. It was a key. A single key. Old brass, tarnished with age. It did not look like a house key or a car key. It looked like a key to something smaller. A desk, a cabinet, a safe. Nora held it in her palm and looked at the trees. Someone had been here. Someone had dropped this key. And someone had been in the garden with Gordon Marsh when he died. She put the key in her pocket and walked back to her car. The snow was falling harder now. By tomorrow, the path would be clean. But Nora had what she needed. 3 sets of footprints, a key, a coat that did not belong, and a dead man who should have known better than to walk alone in the dark. Chapter 3. The Nephew's Alibi. Nora found Barry Marsh at his uncle's house at 9:30 the next morning. She had called ahead. Barry said he would be there, sorting through his uncle's things, and he sounded surprised that she wanted to talk to him. Surprised and something else. Careful. The house was warmer than it had been the day before. Margaret had turned up the heat, or someone else had. Nora found Barry in the kitchen, drinking coffee and staring out the window at the garden. Barry Marsh was 41, soft around the middle, with his uncle's eyes and none of his uncle's composure. He looked up when Nora came in and did not stand. "You're the deputy," he said. "I'm Deputy Alcott. I have some questions about your uncle." "I figured." Barry set down his coffee cup. "And Margaret said you'd be coming. She's upstairs. Didn't want to talk." "That's fine. I'm here to talk to you." Barry gestured to the chair across from him. Nora sat. "When was the last time you saw your uncle?" 3 weeks ago? Maybe 4. I came up from Portland for the weekend. We had dinner. How did he seem? Barry shrugged. Same as always. Stubborn, opinionated, told me I should move back to Stillwater Cove and stop wasting my time in the city. Did you argue? Barry looked out the window. The garden was white, the footprints from the night of Gordon's death completely covered now. We argued, he said. We always argued. That's what we did. What did you argue about? Money? What else? Barry picked up his coffee cup and put it down again without drinking. My grandmother left a trust fund. Gordon was the trustee. He was thinking about restructuring it, changing the terms. Changing them how? Cutting me out? Or reducing my share? Something like that. Barry's jaw tightened. He didn't come right out and say it, but I could tell. He was looking for a reason. Did he find one? Barry did not answer. Mr. Marsh, Nora said. Where were you on the night your uncle died? Barry's eyes snapped to her face. You think I had something to do with this? I'm asking where you were. I was here, in this house. I drove up from Portland that afternoon. Aunt Margaret can tell you. She told me she went to bed at 9. So did I. I was in the guest room, asleep. Can anyone confirm that? Barry was quiet for a long moment. His hands were flat on the table, fingers spread, and Nora could see the tension in them. I was alone, he said, but that doesn't mean I killed him. No one said you did. You're thinking it. Everyone's thinking it. The nephew with the money problems, the uncle who was about to cut him off. Barry laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's too obvious. Sometimes the obvious answer is the right one. Not this time. Nora studied him. Barry's hands were still flat on the table. His shoulders were tight. His eyes kept drifting to the window, to the garden, to the path where his uncle had died. What did you and your uncle argue about specifically? She said. Not the trust fund. The fight everyone heard about. Barry's face went still. Who told you about that? Iris Harlow. She said you and Gordon had a loud argument at the diner 3 weeks ago. The whole place heard it. We were in a booth. It wasn't the whole place, but it was loud. Barry picked up his coffee cup and drained it. Then he set it down with a click. He said I was a disappointment, said I'd wasted my education and my inheritance and my life. Said my father would be ashamed of me. Was that when he mentioned the trust fund? Yeah, he said he was thinking about changing it, giving my share to the Historical Society instead. Barry's voice was flat. Said they'd do more good with it than I ever would. That's a hard thing to hear. It was Gordon. He didn't believe in soft landings. Nora wrote this down. The argument was public. The motive was clear. The alibi was weak. Did you threaten him? She said. Barry looked at her. His eyes were red around the edges, not from crying, but from lack of sleep. I told him he would regret it, he said. I told him he couldn't just take what wasn't his. That's not a threat. That's just the truth. Some people might hear it differently. Some people can hear whatever they want. Barry stood up. I didn't kill my uncle. I didn't go near that path. I was in bed, asleep, while he was out there freezing to death. If you don't believe me, that's your problem. Nora stood too. She did not raise her voice. She did not change her expression. I'll need your boots, she said. My boots? The ones you were wearing the night your uncle died. I need to see them. Barry stared at her. Then he laughed again, the same hollow sound. You're kidding. I'm not. You think my boots left footprints in the snow? I think I need to eliminate you as a suspect. Giving me your boots is the fastest way to do that. Barry was quiet for a moment. Then he walked to the mudroom and came back with a pair of work boots. Brown leather, well worn, size 11. Nora looked at the treads. Diamond pattern. Deeper groove on the outside edge. She took out her phone and pulled up the photographs from the garden. The prints in the snow had been size 11. Diamond pattern. Deeper groove on the outside edge. "These are yours," she said. "Yeah, they're my boots. Were you wearing them the night your uncle died?" Barry hesitated. "Mr. Marsh, I wore them that day when I drove up from Portland. I changed into slippers after dinner." He paused. "I didn't go outside that night." "Then how did your boots get in the garden?" Barry's face went pale. "I don't know." Nora looked at the boots again. The treads were packed with dried mud and a few grains of salt. No snow, no moisture. If Barry had worn these boots in the snow, they would still be wet. They were not. Someone else had worn them, or someone had cleaned them. "I'm taking these," Nora said. "You can't just—" "I can. They're evidence." Nora picked up the boots. "If you remember anything else about that night, call me." She walked out before Barry could argue. Nora drove to the station with Barry's boots in the back seat. Gannett was not there. The office was empty and cold. She set the boots on her desk and looked at them. Size 11. Diamond tread. The same pattern she had photographed in the garden. But the boots in the garden had been wet. These were dry. So either Barry had worn a different pair of boots that night, or someone else had worn these boots and cleaned them afterward. Or the boots in the garden were not Barry's at all. She needed a closer look. Nora pulled out her magnifying glass and examined the treads. The diamond pattern was common. Half the men in Stillwater Cove probably owned boots with this tread. But the groove on the outside edge was unusual. A manufacturing defect, maybe, or wear from walking on uneven ground. She photographed the treads and compared them to the garden photographs. The groove matched. The spacing matched. Barry's boots had been in the garden, but Barry said he had not gone outside. Someone was lying. Barry. Or the boots. Nora sat back and thought about the timeline. Gordon left for the meeting at 6:30. The meeting ended at 8. The storm started at 7. The temperature dropped at 9. If Barry had gone outside, he would have done it after 9, when the ground froze. That would explain why the boots were dry. The snow had stopped falling by then, and the cold had hardened the surface. But Barry said he was in bed at 9, asleep. She needed to talk to Margaret again, and she needed to find out who else had been in that garden. The afternoon was cold and gray. Nora drove back to Gordon's house, but no one answered the door. Margaret's car was gone. Barry's was still in the driveway, but he did not come to the door when she knocked. She left and drove to Harlow's Diner instead. Iris was behind the counter, wiping down the griddle. She looked up when Nora came in and nodded toward the corner booth. "Heard about Gordon," Iris said, sliding into the booth across from Nora with a coffee pot. "Terrible business. Did you see anyone unusual around town that night, the night of the storm?" Iris poured the coffee and set down the pot. Her eyes were sharp, focused. The eyes of someone who had been watching Stillwater Cove for 50 years and missed nothing. "I saw Barry Marsh," she said. "He came in for dinner around 6, left around 7. "Was he alone?" "Yeah. Sat at the counter. Didn't talk to anyone. Looked nervous." "Nervous how?" "Kept checking his phone, looking out the window, like he was waiting for someone." Iris shrugged. "Or waiting for something to happen." "Did he say anything about his uncle?" "Not to me, but I heard him on the phone in the parking lot, before he left." Iris leaned in. "He said, 'I'll handle it. Don't worry.' Then he hung up and drove off toward Gordon's house." Nora wrote this down. Barry had been on the phone. He had said he would handle something. "What about Gordon?" Nora said. "Did he come in that day?" "He came in for lunch," Sat right where you're sitting. Ordered the meatloaf. Iris paused. He asked about the boatyard. Wanted to know if anyone had been poking around. You mentioned that yesterday. I did, and I've been thinking about it since. Iris set down the coffee pot. Gordon didn't care about the boatyard. He never did. So why was he asking? Maybe someone else cared? Someone else did. Eleanor Fenn. She's been asking about the boatyard for months. Wanted to know who bought it, who owned it, who had access. Iris nodded toward the window. She's in town now, staying at the Seabird Inn. Nora wrote this down. Eleanor Fenn. The name was familiar. Old family. The boatyard fire in 1983. Anything else? Nora said. Iris was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and touched Nora's hand. Be careful, she said. Gordon was a hard man, but he wasn't stupid. If someone got to him, they're not going to stop just because he's dead. Nora nodded and finished her coffee. She left cash on the table and walked out into the cold. At 5 o'clock, Nora drove to the Seabird Inn. Magnus Torkel was at the front desk, arranging a display of local maps. He looked up when she came in and nodded. Deputy Alcott? Magnus, I need to talk to one of your guests. Eleanor Fenn? Magnus's face did not change. His eyes did. She checked out this morning. When? 9 o'clock. She said she had business in Portland. Did she say when she'd be back? No. Magnus folded a map and set it aside. She paid in cash, left no forwarding address. Nora looked at the guest register. Eleanor Fenn had checked in 3 days ago, 2 days before Gordon Marsh died. Did she have visitors while she was here? Magnus was quiet for a moment. He had the quality of someone who knew more than he said and said only what he had to. She had dinner with someone on her second night. In the dining room. They sat in the corner. I did not overhear the conversation. Who was the someone? A woman. Older. Gray hair. I did not recognize her. Nora wrote this down. Gray hair. Older. That described half the women in Stillwater Cove. Thank you. Magnus? Deputy? Magnus paused. Gordon Marsh was a good man. Difficult, but good. I hope you find out what happened. Nora walked out into the parking lot. The sky was dark now. The clouds low and heavy. More snow was coming. She sat in her car and called Gannett. Eleanor Fenn checked out of the Seabird this morning, she said. She was in town for 3 days. She had dinner with someone the night before Gordon died. Anyone we know? Magnus didn't recognize her. Gray hair, older. That's half the town. Nora. I know. Nora started the car. I need to find out what Eleanor was doing here. And I need to find out who she had dinner with. Any leads? 1. The boatyard. Gordon was asking about it. Eleanor was asking about it. Nora pulled out of the parking lot. There's something there. I just don't know what yet. Nora drove home at 6:30. The cottage was dark and cold. The boiler was still not working. She built a fire and sat on the floor in front of it. Beckett appeared from the bedroom and settled into her lap without being invited. She pulled out her notebook and read through her notes. Gordon Marsh. Dead in the garden. Boots dry. Coat wrong. Footprints from 3 directions. Barry Marsh. Argument with Gordon about money. Weak alibi. Boots that matched the prints. Eleanor Fenn. In town for 3 days. Asking about the boatyard. Dinner with an unknown woman. The boatyard. The fire in 1983. The fire that had destroyed the Fenn family business. Gordon had been on the selectmen when the fire happened. He had signed off on the investigation. He had declared it an accident. But Eleanor Fenn did not think it was an accident. and she had been asking questions. Nora looked at the fire. The flames were low now, the wood burning down to coals. She thought about the key in her pocket, the brass key she had found in the snow. It was old, tarnished. It looked like it belonged to something from another time. A desk, a cabinet, a safe. Gordon had a safe in his office, a safe he had started locking after his argument with Barry. Nora pulled out the key and held it up to the firelight. It was too small for a house, too delicate for a car, but it might fit a wall safe. She would find out tomorrow, with a warrant. Beckett purred in her lap. The fire crackled. The cold pressed against the windows. Nora closed her notebook and watched the flames until the fire burned down to nothing. Chapter 4. What the Library Kept. The warrant arrived at 9 the next morning. Judge Arthur Chen signed it without comment, which meant he trusted Nora's judgment, or he wanted Gordon Marsh's death resolved before the selectmen started asking questions. Either way, Nora had what she needed. She drove to Gordon's house with a copy of the warrant in her coat pocket. Margaret's car was in the driveway now. Barry's was gone. Margaret answered the door in her bathrobe. She looked older than she had 2 days ago, the grief settling into her face like a second skin. "The safe," Nora said. "I need to open it." Margaret stepped aside without arguing. She led Nora to the office and stood in the doorway while Nora crossed to the bookshelf. The safe was still there, still closed, still locked. Nora knelt in front of it and pulled out the brass key she had found in the snow. It fit. The lock turned with a soft click. The safe door swung open. Inside was a single envelope, white, unmarked, sealed. Nora pulled it out and held it up to the light. Something was inside. Paper. Folded. She opened the envelope carefully and pulled out a letter. Gordon's handwriting. Sharp, precise. The handwriting of a man who had spent 11 years signing official documents. The letter was dated 2 weeks before his death. Deputy Alcott, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. I am not a man given to paranoia, but I have learned to recognize the difference between caution and fear. What I feel now is the latter. For 11 years, I have kept the secrets of this town, not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. The selectmen come and go, the sheriff comes and goes, but the records remain, and someone has been tampering with them. The Capital Improvement Fund. The account number is on the back of this letter. I have been watching it for 6 months. Money has been moved. Small amounts, never enough to trigger an audit, but enough to add up. I know who is responsible. I have known for weeks, but I needed proof before I could act. I thought I had time. I was wrong. The person I am about to confront is someone this town trusts. Someone who has been in positions of authority for years. Someone who will not go quietly. If I do not survive this conversation, look at the withdrawals, follow the money, and do not trust anyone who tells you this was an accident. Gordon Marsh. Nora read the letter twice, then she turned it over. On the back was an account number. A bank in Portland. An account in the name of the Stillwater Cove Capital Improvement Fund. And a name, written small in the bottom corner. Harriet. Nora folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. "Who is Harriet?" she said. Margaret looked up from the doorway. Her face was pale. "Harriet Baines, the town clerk." Nora had met Harriet Baines once or twice, a quiet woman in her 50s, efficient, unremarkable. Someone who had worked for Gordon for 9 years without drawing attention to herself. Did your husband ever mention problems with Harriet? No, he never mentioned her at all. Margaret paused. But he started staying late at the office a few months ago. He said he was catching up on paperwork. I believed him. Nora looked at the safe again. The letter was the only thing inside. No money, no documents. Just the letter and the account number and the name. Gordon had known he was in danger. He had written this letter and hidden it where only someone with a key could find it. The key Nora had found in the snow. Someone had dropped it. Someone who had been in the garden that night. Someone who had access to Gordon's office. Someone who knew about the safe. Someone like Harriet Baines. Nora drove to the town hall at 10:30. The building was old, brick, with a clock tower that had stopped working in 1992. The selectmen's offices were on the second floor, along with the town clerk's office and the records room. Harriet Baines was at her desk when Nora walked in. She looked up and smiled. It was a normal smile, friendly, unremarkable. "Deputy Alcott," Harriet said, "what can I do for you?" "I need to ask you some questions about Gordon Marsh." Harriet's smile did not change, but her eyes did. Something behind them went careful and still. "Of course," she said. "Anything I can do to help." "When was the last time you saw him?" "The day he died. He came in to review the budget before the meeting. He was here for about an hour." "What time?" 4 o'clock, maybe 4:30. He left around 5. "How did he seem?" Harriet tilted her head. The gesture was practiced, the gesture of someone who had been asked this question before and had prepared an answer. "He seemed fine. Tired, maybe. But Gordon was always tired this time of year. The budget review takes a lot out of him." "Did he mention anyone threatening him? Any concerns about safety?" "No, nothing like that." "Did he mention his nephew Barry?" Harriet's smile flickered. "He mentioned that Barry was in town. He wasn't happy about it, but that was normal. They didn't get along." "Did Gordon ever talk about the Capital Improvement Fund?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Harriet's smile did not change, but her hands moved. She folded them on her desk, unfolded them, folded them again. "The Capital Improvement Fund is part of my responsibilities," she said. "Gordon reviewed the accounts monthly. Everything was in order." "Were there any discrepancies? Any unusual withdrawals?" "No, the accounts were clean." Harriet's voice was steady. "I can show you the records if you'd like." "I'd like that very much." Harriet stood up and walked to a filing cabinet against the wall. She pulled out a folder and brought it back to her desk. "These are the past 12 months," she said, "all accounted for, signed off by Gordon and the other selectmen." Nora took the folder and flipped through it. The numbers looked right. The signatures looked right. Nothing obvious jumped out. But Gordon had written that letter for a reason. He had named Harriet for a reason. "I'll need to take these," Nora said, "for review." Harriet's smile finally wavered. "Is that necessary? These are town records. They're not supposed to leave the building." "I have a warrant." Harriet was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you need." Nora tucked the folder under her arm and walked to the door. She stopped and turned. "One more thing," Nora said. "Where were you the night Gordon died?" "At home, with my husband. He'll confirm it." "Did you go outside that night?" "No, it was too cold." Nora looked at Harriet's feet. She was wearing loafers, black leather, low heel, not boots. But that did not mean anything. Harriet could have worn boots that night and changed out of them. "Thank you," Nora said. "I'll be in touch." She walked out of the office and down the stairs. The folder was heavy in her hand, full of paper and numbers and signatures. Gordon had named Harriet, but he had not said what she had done, Not in the letter. Nora needed more information. She needed records. She needed history. She needed Dot Fenwick. The Bellamy Library was quiet, as always. The stone building was cold in the winter, colder than the outside somehow, and the only heat came from the radiators that clanked and hissed along the walls. Dot Fenwick was at her desk in the reference section, reading a book with a cover so old the title had faded to nothing. She looked up when Nora came in and removed her reading glasses. "You're here about Gordon Marsh?" Dot said. "I'm here about a lot of things." Dot set down her book and stood up. She was 70 years old, precise in her movements, with white hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had been cataloging information for 5 decades. "Follow me." Dot led Nora to the archives, a room in the basement that smelled of old paper and dust and something else. Something that might have been preservation chemicals or might have been time itself. "What do you need?" Dot said. "The Capital Improvement Fund. The last 10 years. Every withdrawal. Every deposit. Every signature." Dot raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of paper." "I have time." Dot nodded and disappeared into the stacks. Nora waited. Standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by boxes and files and the accumulated records of 280 years, Dot returned 10 minutes later with a cardboard box. She set it on the table and opened the lid. "These are the public records," Dot said. "The ones anyone can see. The withdrawals, the deposits, the signatures, and the ones no one can see." Dot looked at Nora for a long moment. Then she reached into the box and pulled out a second folder, smaller than the others, tucked beneath the official documents. "These are the records that were never filed," Dot said. "Gordon brought them to me 6 months ago. He asked me to keep them safe." Nora opened the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, withdrawal slips, transfer authorizations, all signed by the same person, Harriet Baines. The amounts were small, $500 here, $1,000 there, never enough to trigger an audit, but over 6 months they added up to nearly $15,000. Nora looked at the dates. The withdrawals had started 8 months ago. They had continued every month since. "How did Gordon find these?" Nora said. "Someone sent them to him, anonymously, in the mail." Dot folded her hands on the table. "He didn't know who, but he knew what they meant." "Embezzlement," Dot nodded. "He was going to confront her, after the budget review. He told me so himself." "The night he died." "Yes." Nora looked at the folder again. The evidence was right here. Gordon had had it for 6 months. He had waited. He had gathered more information. And then someone had stopped him. "Did Gordon tell anyone else about these?" Nora said. "I don't think so. He was careful. He didn't trust many people." "Did he trust you?" Dot was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad. "He trusted me to keep his secrets," she said. "And I did. Until now." Nora closed the folder and tucked it under her arm. "Thank you, Dot." "Be careful, Nora." Dot's voice was soft. "Whoever killed Gordon is still out there, and they know you're looking." Nora drove back to the station with the evidence in her passenger seat. The sky was darkening again, more snow on the way, and the temperature was dropping. She spread the documents across her desk and started reading. Harriet Baines had been embezzling from the Capital Improvement Fund for 8 months, $15,000, give or take. Not a fortune, but enough to matter. Gordon had known. He had the evidence. He had been planning to confront her, and then he had died. But the letter in the safe said Gordon was going to confront someone else, someone the town trusted, someone who would not go quietly. That could be Harriet. She was trusted. She had worked for Gordon for 9 years. No one suspected her. But the letter also said Gordon had known who was responsible for weeks. He had named Harriet on the back of the letter, but he had not said she was the killer. He had just written her name. Nora read the letter again. The person I am about to confront is someone this town trusts. Someone who has been in positions of authority for years. Someone who will not go quietly. Harriet had been in authority. She was the town clerk, but she was not the only one. Gordon had been the head selectman for 11 years. He knew everyone. He had worked with everyone. Who else had access to the records? Who else could have been moving money? Nora picked up her phone and called Dot. The Capital Improvement Fund. Nora said, "Who else has signing authority besides Gordon and Harriet?" Dot was quiet for a moment. Nora could hear her breathing, could hear the sound of pages turning. "3 people," Dot said. "The other selectmen, Celia Holt, Andrew Marsh, and Arthur Chen." Nora wrote down the names. Celia Holt had run against Gordon 3 times. She had lost every time. She had motive to resent him. Andrew Marsh was Gordon's nephew, Barry's father, Gordon's brother. He was on the selectmen too. And Arthur Chen was the judge who had signed the warrant this morning. Nora looked at the names. Someone in this town had killed Gordon Marsh. Someone who had access to the records. Someone who had been moving money. Someone who had been in the garden that night. She needed to find out who. Chapter 5. The First Thread Pulls. Nora spent the afternoon at her desk, building a timeline. Gordon Marsh left his house at 6:30 on the night of his death. He walked to the town hall for the budget review meeting. The meeting started at 7 and ended at 8. Gordon left through the side door, the one that led to the path. The storm started at 7. By 8, the snow was falling steadily. By 9, the ground was frozen. Gordon's body was found at 5:45 the next morning. His boots were dry. His coat was wrong. The medical examiner's preliminary report had arrived while Nora was at the library. She pulled it out and read it again. Cause of death, hypothermia. Contributing factors, exposure, inadequate clothing. Possible cardiac event. No signs of violence, no defensive wounds. The victim appears to have lain down voluntarily and succumbed to the cold. But Gordon had not lain down voluntarily. The angle of his body was wrong for that, too straight, too symmetrical. A man who lay down to rest in the snow would have curled up, would have tucked his arms in, would have made himself small. Gordon's arms were at his sides. His legs were straight. He looked like a man who had been placed there. Nora circled that in her notes and moved on. The footprints. 3 sets. Gordon's. From the house to the body. Someone from the town hall direction, stopping 50 feet short. Someone from the woods, crossing the path and disappearing. The boots she had taken from Barry matched the prints from the woods. The size, the tread pattern, the distinctive groove on the outside edge. But Barry said he had not gone outside that night. He said he had changed into slippers after dinner and gone to bed. Nora did not believe him. But she needed more than belief. She needed proof. She picked up her phone and called Barry's number. It went straight to voicemail. She left a message and hung up. Then she called the medical examiner's office. "Dr. Franks, please." A pause. Then Franks's voice came on the line. "Deputy, I was just about to call you." "What did you find?" The toxicology report came back early. Gordon Marsh had a sedative in his system. Not enough to kill him, enough to make him drowsy, enough to make him confused. Nora's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of sedative? Lorazepam, prescription only, common for anxiety or insomnia. Franks paused. Gordon Marsh had no prescription for lorazepam. I checked with his doctor. Someone gave it to him. Someone put it in his food or drink, yes. Probably within an hour of his death. The levels are consistent with that timeline. Nora wrote this down. A sedative. Someone had drugged Gordon before he left the house or at the meeting. Anything else? One more thing. The coat. The one he was wearing. It belonged to someone else. Who? The label inside is from a dry cleaner in Portland. I called them. The coat belongs to a woman named Celia Holt. Nora set down her pen. Celia Holt, Gordon's political rival, the woman who had run against him 3 times and lost. She had had dinner with Gordon the night he died. She said they parted at 8. Gordon's neighbor said his kitchen light was on past 10. Now her coat was on Gordon's body. Thank you, Doctor. Nora hung up and stared at her notes. Celia Holt's coat. Harriet Bain's name on the letter. Barry Marsh's boots in the garden. 3 suspects. 3 threads. She needed to pull one and see where it led. Nora found Celia Holt at her house on the bluff. A small Cape Cod with a view of the harbor and a garden that was buried under snow. Celia answered the door in a sweater and jeans. She was 53, fit, with the kind of face that had learned to smile when it did not want to. Deputy Alcott, she said. I was wondering when you'd come. You were? Gordon Marsh is dead. You're the deputy. 2 and 2 make 4. Celia stepped back. Come in. It's cold out there. The house was warm, heated by a wood stove in the living room. Celia led Nora to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. You had dinner with Gordon the night he died? Nora said. I did. He called me that afternoon, said he wanted to talk, something about the budget. Where did you eat? His house. Margaret made dinner. Gordon and I ate in the dining room. What time did you leave? 8? Maybe 8:15. I don't remember exactly. Gordon's neighbor said his kitchen light was on past 10. Celia shrugged. Then Margaret was still up. Or Gordon was. I wasn't there. Nora took a sip of coffee. It was good. Strong. The way she liked it. Dr. Franks called me this morning, Nora said. He identified the coat Gordon was wearing when he died. Celia's face went still, the way Harriet's had, the careful stillness of someone who knew what was coming. It was your coat, Nora said, from the dry cleaner in Portland. Celia set down her coffee cup. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. I gave Gordon that coat, she said, a few weeks ago. He said his was getting thin. I had an extra. I offered it to him. He was wearing it the night he died. I know. I saw it on him at dinner. Did you see him after dinner? Celia was quiet for a moment. The wood stove crackled. The wind rattled the windows. No, she said. I went home. I was here by 8:30. Alone. Can anyone confirm that? I called my sister in Bangor around 9. She'll remember. We talked for about 20 minutes. Nora wrote this down. A phone call. It was something. Not much, but something. Did Gordon seem unwell at dinner? Nora said. Celia tilted her head. What do you mean? Drowsy, confused, like he might have taken something? He seemed tired, but Gordon was always tired lately. Celia paused. Why? Did someone give him something? The toxicology report found a sedative in his system, lorazepam, enough to make him drowsy. Celia's face went pale. Someone drugged him. Someone put it in his food or drink, probably at dinner. Celia stared at her. Then she looked down at her hands. I made the coffee, she said. After dinner, Gordon and I had coffee in the living room while Margaret cleaned up. Did you see anyone else touch the coffee? No, just me and Gordon. Nora studied Celia's face. The woman looked genuinely shaken. But that did not mean anything. Killers could look shaken too. Where were you between 9 and midnight? Nora said. Here, asleep. I went to bed around 9:30. Did you go outside? No, it was too cold. Nora looked at Celia's boots by the door. Snow boots, heavy tread, size 8. The prints in the garden had been size 11. Celia was too small to have made those prints. But that did not mean she was innocent. She could have sent someone else. She could have worn different boots. Nora finished her coffee and stood up. I'll need your boots, she said, the ones you wore that night. Celia nodded and fetched them from the closet. Black snow boots, size 8, with a different tread pattern than the prints in the garden. Nora took them and walked to the door. One more thing, Nora said. Did Gordon mention anyone threatening him, anyone he was worried about? Celia was quiet for a long moment. He mentioned Harriet, she said finally, the town clerk. He said she'd been acting strange lately, nervous. He didn't know why. Did he say anything else? No, just that he was going to talk to her, after the budget review. Nora nodded and walked out into the cold. She sat in her car for a few minutes, thinking. Celia's coat on Gordon's body. Celia's coffee at Gordon's dinner. Celia's motive. Years of losing to Gordon in elections. But the sedative could have been added to the coffee after Celia poured it. Or before. Margaret had been in the kitchen. Barry had been in the house. And Harriet had been at the town hall, where Gordon had gone after dinner. Anyone could have drugged him. Anyone could have put Celia's coat on his body to point suspicion away from themselves. Nora started the car and drove to the station. She needed to look at the town hall security footage. Gordon had been there from 7 to 8. Someone had seen him. Someone had been in that building. And someone had followed him out the side door. The town hall's security system was old. 2 cameras, one at the front entrance and one in the parking lot. Neither covered the side door. Nora reviewed the footage anyway. The front entrance camera showed Gordon arriving at 6:55. He walked in alone, carrying a briefcase. His coat was dark back. His own coat, the heavy one, not Celia's. The parking lot camera showed the lot filling up. Cars came and went, nothing unusual. At 8:01, the meeting ended. People filed out. Gordon was not among them. He must have used the side door. Nora watched the footage again. This time she watched for Harriet Baines. Harriet arrived at 6:40, 15 minutes before Gordon. She parked in the back, out of frame. She walked to the front entrance and disappeared inside. She did not come out through the front. Neither did Celia Holt. Neither did Andrew Marsh. Nora checked the timestamps. The meeting ended at 8. By 8:15, the parking lot was empty. Gordon had been in that building until at least 8. Someone had been with him. Someone had followed him out the side door. Nora sat back in her chair and looked at her notes. 3 suspects, 3 threads. The boots pointed to Barry. The coat pointed to Celia. The letter pointed to Harriet. But only one of them had been in the garden that night. Only one of them had dropped the key. Nora pulled the brass key from her pocket and held it up to the light. It was old, tarnished. It looked like it belonged to something from another time, something like the safe in Gordon's office. Harriet had access to that office. Harriet knew about the safe. But the key had been in the garden. Harriet said she had not gone outside that night. Unless she was lying. Nora put the key back in her pocket and stood up. She needed to talk to Harriet again. Tonight. Before the woman had time to prepare. Chapter 6. the weight of evidence. Nora drove to Harriet Baines's house at 6 o'clock. The sky was fully dark now, and the temperature had dropped into the single digits. More snow was forecast for overnight. Harriet lived in a modest ranch house on the south side of town, within walking distance of the town hall. The lights were on. A car was in the driveway. Nora knocked on the door. A man answered, tall, gray-haired, with the tired face of someone who had worked a blue-collar job for 40 years. "Deputy Alcott," Nora said. "I need to speak with Harriet." The man nodded and stepped back. "She's in the kitchen. I'm Frank, by the way. Frank Baines." Nora followed him through the living room to the kitchen. Harriet was at the table, a cup of tea in front of her, a stack of papers to her left. She looked up when Nora came in, and her face did not change. "Deputy," she said, "I was wondering when you'd come back." Frank hovered in the doorway. "Should I leave?" "No," Harriet said. "Stay." Nora sat down across from Harriet. She set the folder of documents on the table between them. "I have some questions about the Capital Improvement Fund," Nora said. Harriet looked at the folder. Her hands were flat on the table, fingers spread. The way Barry's had been. The same tension. The same careful stillness. "I already showed you the records," Harriet said. "Everything was in order. These records say otherwise." Nora opened the folder and pulled out the copies Dot had given her. The bank statements, the withdrawal slips, the transfer authorizations, all signed by Harriet Baines. Harriet looked at them. Her face did not change. "Where did you get these?" she said. "Gordon Marsh gave them to Dot Fenwick for safekeeping. 6 months ago." Harriet was quiet for a long moment. Frank moved from the doorway to stand behind his wife, his hand on her shoulder. "Harriet," he said, "what is this?" "It's nothing," Harriet said. "A mistake. A misunderstanding." $15,000, Nora said. "Transferred out of the Capital Improvement Fund over 8 months. Small amounts. Never enough to trigger an audit." She pulled out the letter Gordon had written. "Gordon knew he was going to confront you after the budget review." Harriet looked at the letter. Her eyes moved across the page, reading Gordon's words. When she finished, she set the letter down and folded her hands. "I didn't kill him," she said. "Then who did?" "I don't know." "You were at the town hall that night. You were in the building when Gordon left." Harriet's jaw tightened. "I left through the front. I went home. Frank can tell you." "I got home at 8:30, Frank said. "She was here, in the kitchen, making tea." "What time did you get home?" Nora said. 8:30, same as always." Nora looked at Harriet. "The meeting ended at 8. You left through the front. You walked home. That's a 15-minute walk. You would have gotten home at 8:15. Harriet's hands tightened on the table. "Unless you didn't go straight home," Nora said. "Unless you went somewhere else first." "I went home." "Did you go into the garden? Did you follow Gordon down the path?" Harriet shook her head. Her eyes were bright now, wet at the edges. "I didn't kill him," she said again. "I made a mistake with the money. A bad decision. I was going to pay it back. Gordon knew. He gave me a chance to make it right." "He gave you 6 months." "I needed time. My mother was sick. The medical bills." $15,000 in medical bills? Harriet's face crumbled. Frank put his arm around her shoulders. "The money was there," Harriet said. "I thought no one would notice. Small amounts, just until I could pay it back." She looked up at Nora. "I was going to tell Gordon after the budget review. Confess. Turn myself in. He knew that." "Did he believe you?" "Yes. He said we would figure it out together. After the meeting." Harriet wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He was a good man. A hard man, but good. He didn't deserve to die. Nora studied her. The tears looked real. The grief looked real. But killers cried too. Where were you between 8 and 9? Nora said. Walking home. I took the long way. I needed to think. The long way past the garden. Harriet hesitated. Harriet, Frank said, tell her. I walked past the garden. Harriet said. I saw Gordon. He was on the path. He was talking to someone. Nora's pen stopped moving. Who? I don't know. It was dark. The snow was coming down. I couldn't see a face. Man or woman? A man, I think. Tall. Wearing a dark coat. Was it Barry Marsh? I don't know. I couldn't see. Did Gordon see you? No. I stayed back. I watched for a minute, then I went home. What were they doing? Talking, arguing, maybe. Gordon had his hands up, like this. Harriet raised her hands to shoulder height, palms out, like he was trying to calm someone down. Did you see anyone else? Anyone in the woods? Harriet shook her head. Just Gordon and the other man. That's all. Nora wrote this down. A tall man, dark coat, arguing with Gordon on the path. That could be Barry. It could be Andrew Marsh. It could be someone else entirely. Thank you, Nora said. She stood up and gathered the documents. I'll be taking these, and I'll be back with more questions. Harriet nodded. Frank walked Nora to the door. She didn't kill him, Frank said quietly. She's not capable of it. People are capable of more than you think, Nora said. She walked out into the cold and drove home. The cottage was dark. The boiler was still not working. Nora built a fire and sat on the floor in front of it, Beckett in her lap, her notes spread around her. She had 3 suspects, 3 threads, 3 pieces of a puzzle that did not quite fit together. Barry Marsh, boots in the garden, weak alibi, motive money. Celia Holt, coat on Gordon's body, dinner with Gordon the night he died. Motive, revenge. Harriet Baines, embezzlement. Gordon knew. Last person to see him alive. Motive, fear. The sedative pointed to someone with access to Gordon's food or drink. Celia had made the coffee. Margaret had made dinner. Barry had been in the house. The key pointed to someone with access to Gordon's office. Harriet had that access. Barry might have had it too, if Gordon had given him a key. The coat pointed to Celia, but Celia said she had given it to Gordon weeks ago. Anyone could have taken it from his house. Nora looked at the fire. The flames were low, the wood burning down to coals. She needed to talk to Andrew Marsh, Gordon's brother, Barry's father, a selectman for 12 years. He had been at the meeting that night. He had left through the front. He had gone home. But his alibi was his wife, and his wife was not answering her phone. Nora made a note to interview Andrew tomorrow. Then she picked up her phone and called Gannett. It's late, he said. Harriet Baines was embezzling from the Capital Improvement Fund. $15,000. Gordon knew. Gannett was quiet for a moment. Did she kill him? I don't know. She says she saw him on the path after the meeting, talking to a tall man in a dark coat. Barry Marsh. That's my guess, but I need proof. You have the boots. I have boots that match the prints. That's not proof. It's circumstantial. Gannett sighed. What do you need? A warrant for Barry's phone records. I want to know who he called that night. I'll call Judge Chen in the morning. Thank you. Nora hung up and looked at the fire. Beckett purred in her lap. The cold pressed against the windows. Someone had killed Gordon Marsh. Someone had drugged him, walked him into the garden, and left him there to freeze. That someone was still in Stillwater Cove. That someone was walking around, going to work, eating dinner, sleeping in their own bed. Nora would find them. She would find the thread that pulled everything apart. She just needed one more piece. Chapter 7. The Crack in the Story. The warrant arrived at 9 the next morning. Judge Chen signed it without comment, just as he had signed the first one, and Nora drove to the phone company's regional office in Rockland before the snow made the roads impassable. The records took 2 hours to process. Nora sat in the waiting room, drinking bad coffee from a vending machine, and thought about the case. 3 suspects, 3 threads, 3 people who had motive and opportunity. Barry Marsh had the boots, the argument with Gordon, and the weak alibi. He had been in the house the night Gordon died. He had access to Gordon's food and drink. He could have put the sedative in Gordon's coffee after dinner. Celia Holt had the coat, the history of losing to Gordon, and the dinner that night. She had made the coffee. She had been alone with Gordon in the living room while Margaret cleaned up. Harriet Baines had the embezzlement, the letter naming her, and the admission that she had walked past the garden that night. She had seen Gordon arguing with someone. She had not come forward until Nora pushed her. Any of them could have done it, but only one of them had. The phone records arrived at 11. Nora took the printouts to her car and read them in the parking lot, the engine running to keep the heat on. Barry Marsh's phone had made 3 calls on the night Gordon died. The first was to his father, Andrew Marsh, at 6:15. The second was to an unknown number at 7:43. The third was to the same unknown number at 9:02. Nora looked up the unknown number. It was registered to a woman named Linda Farrow in Portland, Barry's girlfriend. The same girlfriend who had initially provided his alibi and then recanted. She dialed the number. "Linda Farrow," a woman's voice said. "This is Deputy Nora Alcott from the Stillwater Cove Sheriff's Office. I have some questions about Barry Marsh." A long pause. Then, "I already told you. I was mistaken about the time. You said Barry was with you until 11. Then you said he left at 8. Why did you change your story?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Because Barry asked me to," Linda said. "He said he needed an alibi. He said something had happened, and he needed me to say he was with me." "What had happened?" "He wouldn't tell me. He just said he needed me to say he was in Portland that night." Linda's voice cracked. "I didn't want to lie, but I was scared. He's never asked me to lie before." Where was Barry on the night Gordon Marsh died? He was in Stillwater Cove. He drove up that afternoon. He called me at 9:02 to say goodnight. He sounded strange, shaken. Did he say why? "No, just that something had happened, and he would tell me about it when he got back to Portland." Linda took a breath. "He never did." Nora wrote this down. Barry had been in Stillwater Cove that night. He had called Linda at 9:02, which meant he was still awake at 9, awake and shaken. "Thank you," Nora said. "I may need to talk to you again." She hung up and stared at the printouts. Barry had lied about his alibi. He had asked his girlfriend to lie for him. He had been in Stillwater Cove that night, and something had happened that left him shaken. That something could have been murder. Nora started the car and drove back to Stillwater Cove. She found Barry at Gordon's house, loading boxes into his truck. Margaret was on the porch, watching him with an expression that was somewhere between grief and relief. "Mr. Marsh," Nora said, getting out of her car, "we need to talk." Barry turned. His face was pale, his eyes red. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. I already told you everything I know. You told me you were in bed at 9, asleep. I was. You called your girlfriend at 9:02. You talked for 11 minutes. She said you sounded shaken. Barry's hands tightened on the box he was holding. She's mistaken. She's not. I just got off the phone with her. Nora walked closer. You were in Stillwater Cove that night. You were awake at 9. You called Linda and asked her to lie for you. Barry set down the box. His shoulders sagged. What did you do, Barry? Nothing. I didn't do anything. Then why did you need an alibi? Barry looked at Margaret on the porch. She was watching, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Can we go inside? He said. No, we can talk here. Barry took a breath, then another. I was in the garden, he said, that night, after the meeting. The footprints from the woods. Yeah, that was me. Barry ran a hand through his hair. I was going to talk to Gordon, confront him about the trust fund. I was angry. I've been drinking. What happened? I got there around 8:30. Gordon was already on the path. He was talking to someone. I stayed in the trees. I didn't want to interrupt. Who was he talking to? I couldn't see. It was dark. The snow was coming down, but I heard his voice. He was angry. He said, "You can't keep doing this. It has to stop." And the other person? I couldn't hear what they said, just Gordon. Then Gordon walked away, toward the town hall, and the other person went back toward the house. Which house? Gordon's, I think. They walked in that direction. Nora wrote this down. Someone had followed Gordon from his house to the path. Someone had argued with him. Someone had walked back to the house after. Then what? She said. I waited. I thought about following Gordon, but I was drunk and angry, and I knew I'd say something I'd regret. So I went back to the house. I went to bed. What time was that? 9, maybe 9:15. I called Linda. I told her I was in Portland. I didn't want anyone to know I was here. Why? Because I was drunk. Because I'd been arguing with Gordon. Because I knew how it would look. Barry's voice cracked. But I didn't kill him. I swear to God, I didn't kill him. Nora studied his face. The tears were real. The fear was real. But killers cried too. Who was the other person? Nora said. I don't know. I couldn't see. Man or woman? A man, I think. Tall, wearing a dark coat. The same description Harriet had given. A tall man in a dark coat. Did you see anyone else? Anyone in the garden? No, just Gordon and the other man. Nora looked at the house, at Margaret on the porch, at Barry's truck full of boxes. Don't leave town, she said. I wasn't planning to. Nora walked back to her car and drove to the station. She spread everything across her desk. The phone records, the footprint photographs, the letter from Gordon's safe, the bank statements, the medical examiner's report. A tall man in a dark coat. That was the description both Harriet and Barry had given. A tall man. Arguing with Gordon on the path. Gordon's brother. Andrew Marsh was tall, 6'2". He wore dark coats. He was a selectman. He had been at the meeting that night. Barry's father, the man who had inherited the trust fund if Gordon restructured it, the man who had been on the selectmen for 12 years. Nora pulled up Andrew Marsh's file. He lived in Portland now, but he still owned property in Stillwater Cove. He came to town for selectmen's meetings and stayed at the Seabird Inn. He had been at the meeting the night Gordon died. He had left through the front. He had driven back to Portland. but his drive would have taken him past the garden, past the path where Gordon had been walking. Nora picked up her phone and called the Seabird Inn. "Magnus, did Andrew Marsh stay here the night Gordon died?" A pause. Then, "Yes, he checked in at 2 in the afternoon. He checked out the next morning at 9. "Did he leave the inn that night?" "The rooms have exterior doors. I don't monitor guest movements after check-in." Magnus paused again. "But his car was gone when I locked up at 11. I remember because he parked in my spot." Nora wrote this down. Andrew's car was gone at 11. He had been out that night. He could have been on the path. "Thank you, Magnus." She hung up and stared at the wall. Andrew Marsh, Gordon's brother, a selectman for 12 years, a man with access to the Capital Improvement Fund, a man who would inherit if Gordon restructured the trust fund in Barry's favor. Andrew had motive. He had opportunity. He had been on the path that night, arguing with Gordon. But she needed proof, something that connected him to the crime. She picked up the key from her desk, the brass key she had found in the snow. It was old, tarnished. It looked like it belonged to something from another time. She had assumed it was for Gordon's safe, but the safe's lock was newer. The key was older. She looked at the key again. There was a number stamped on the side. Small, almost worn away. 247. She called Dot. "Does the town hall have lockers or cabinets with numbered keys?" "There are storage lockers in the basement," Dot said. "For the selectmen's records, numbered 241 through 250. "Who has access?" "Any of the selectmen, and Harriet as town clerk." "Thank you." "Dot?" Nora hung up and grabbed her coat. She knew where the key went. Now she needed to find out what was in the locker. Chapter 8. The Lockbox. The town hall basement was cold and damp and smelled like old paper and mildew. Nora flipped the light switch at the bottom of the stairs and waited for the fluorescent tubes to flicker to life. The storage lockers were against the far wall, a row of metal cabinets with numbered placards and padlocks. Nora walked down the line until she reached number 247. The padlock was old, brass, tarnished. It looked like it had been there for decades. Nora pulled out the key she had found in the garden. It slid into the lock and turned with a soft click. She opened the locker door. Inside were 3 cardboard boxes stacked neatly. The labels on the boxes said, in faded marker, "Select Man Records, 1983 through 1990. Nora pulled out the top box and set it on the floor. She lifted the lid. The box was full of files, manila folders, yellowed paper, the smell of old ink and older secrets. She started flipping through them. Town meeting minutes, budget reports, correspondence, everything a selectman would need to document. And then she found it. A folder labeled Fen Boatyard Fire, 1983. Nora pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a report, typed, signed by Gordon Marsh, who had been a selectman even then. The report concluded that the fire had been accidental, caused by faulty wiring in the boatyard's main workshop. But tucked behind the report was a second document, handwritten, unsigned. The fire was not an accident. I was there. I saw who started it. But no one will believe me. The family has too much power. They will bury this like they bury everything else. I am putting this here so someone will find it someday. Someone who is not afraid of the Aldrich Kays. The fire was started by Thomas Aldrich Kay. He was 16 years old. He was drunk. He dropped a lantern in the storage shed and ran. The Fenn family lost everything, and the Aldrich Kays paid for the investigation. Nora read the statement twice. Then she read it again. Thomas Aldrich Kay, the youngest son of the Bluff family, 16 years old in 1983, drunk, a drop lantern, and someone had buried it. Someone had made sure the investigation concluded it was an accident. Gordon Marsh had signed that report. Gordon Marsh had kept the truth in a locked box in the basement for 40 years. Nora looked at the other boxes. There would be more. More secrets. More things Gordon had kept hidden. She pulled out her phone and photographed every page of the folder. Then she put it back in the box and closed the lid. She had what she needed. Not for Gordon's murder, not directly, but for something else. Something that might explain why Gordon had been so worried in his final weeks. Someone had found out about the boatyard. Someone had been asking questions. Eleanor Fenn had been asking questions. She had been in town 3 days before Gordon died. She had asked about the boatyard, and Gordon had asked about it too, at the diner, the day before he died. He had been worried. He had been scared. And then someone had killed him. Nora drove to the station and spread the photographs across her desk, the boatyard fire, the cover-up, Gordon's signature on the false report. Someone had known. Someone had threatened to expose it. And Gordon had been planning to confront that person. But the letter in the safe said the person he was confronting was someone the town trusted, someone in authority. Thomas Aldrich Kay was not in authority. He lived in Boston now, running a hedge fund. He came to Stillwater Cove once a year, if that. But someone else had been involved in the cover-up. Someone else had made sure the investigation went the right way. Who had paid for the investigation? The statement said the Aldrich Kays had paid. But Gordon had signed the report. Gordon had been the one to declare it an accident. Gordon had been bought, or threatened, or both. And 40 years later, someone had found out. Nora picked up her phone and called Dot. The boatyard fire in 1983, Nora said. Who was on the selectmen then? A pause, paper rustling. Gordon Marsh, Arthur Chen, and Eleanor Fenn's father, William Fenn. He resigned a year later. Arthur Chen, the judge. The same. Nora wrote this down. Arthur Chen had been a selectman 40 years ago. He had signed off on the investigation. He had let Gordon declare it an accident, and now he was a judge, a respected figure, someone the town trusted? Thank you. Dot. Nora hung up and stared at the wall. Arthur Chen had signed the warrant for Gordon's safe. He had been cooperative, helpful, even. But he had also been in a position to bury the truth about the boatyard. He had been in a position to protect the Aldrich Kays. And he had been at the town hall the night Gordon died. He had been at the meeting. He had left through the front. But he could have circled back. He could have gone to the garden. He could have argued with Gordon on the path. Nora needed to talk to him. But she needed more than a hunch. She needed evidence. She looked at the photographs again, the handwritten statement, the report signed by Gordon, the folder from the locker. Arthur Chen's signature was on the investigation documents. He had approved the conclusion. He had helped bury the truth. But that was 40 years ago. That did not make him a murderer today. Unless Gordon had threatened to expose him, unless Gordon had finally decided to tell the truth about the boatyard. The letter in the safe said Gordon was going to confront someone. Someone the town trusted. Someone who had been in authority for years. Arthur Chen had been a selectman. He had been a judge for 20 years. He was respected, trusted, and he had been at the meeting the night Gordon died. Nora picked up her phone and called Gannett. I need a background check on Arthur Chen, she said. Financials, property records, anything that connects him to the Aldrich Kay family. Chen. The judge. The same. What does he have to do with Gordon Marsh? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Nora spent the afternoon at the library, going through old town records with Dot. The basement archive was cold, but Dot had a space heater and a pot of tea. And she worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been doing this for decades. Arthur Chen was elected selectman in 1981, Dot said, pulling a folder from a box. He served for 6 years, then he ran for judge and won. Did he have any connection to the Aldrich Kays before that? Dot flipped through the folder. His wife was a Aldrich Kay, distant cousin, but the family helped with his campaign, donations, endorsements. Nora wrote this down. Arthur Chen had family ties to the bluff. He had reason to protect them. The boatyard fire, Nora said. Who investigated it? The state fire marshal's office, but the town selectmen oversaw the process. Gordon Marsh and Arthur Chen were the ones who signed off on the final report. Did anyone question the conclusion? Dot was quiet for a moment. She set down her tea and folded her hands on the table. Elena Fan questioned it, she said. Publicly. Repeatedly. She said the fire was arson. She said someone started it on purpose. What happened? Nothing. The report was official. The case was closed. Eleanor kept talking, but no one listened. Dot paused. She lost her family's business. Her father died a year later. She blamed Gordon and Arthur for covering it up. Did she have proof? If she did, she never showed it to anyone. Dot looked at Nora. Until now. Nora pulled out her phone and showed Dot the photographs from the locker, the handwritten statement, the report signed by Gordon. Dot read the statement slowly. Her face did not change, but her hands tightened on the paper. Where did you find this? In a locked box in the town hall basement. Key 247. Dot looked up. That key belongs to the selectmen. Only the selectmen have access to those lockers. And the town clerk, Dot nodded. But Harriet wouldn't have known about this. She wasn't working for the town in 1983. Someone put that statement in the locker. Someone who wanted it found. Gordon, Dot said. He kept everything. He never threw anything away. He must have kept this too, as insurance. Insurance against what? Against Arthur, against the Aldrich Kays, against anyone who might threaten him. Dot set down the paper. Gordon was not a man who trusted easily. He collected secrets the way other men collected stamps, and he kept them where he could find them. Nora looked at the photographs again. The statement was unsigned. No name, no date, just the accusation. But it was enough. Enough to ruin Arthur Chen's career. Enough to reopen the investigation into the boatyard fire. And enough to give someone a reason to kill Gordon Marsh. Nora left the library at 5. The sky was dark, the snow falling harder now, and the roads were starting to ice over. She drove to the station and found Gannett at his desk, reading the local paper. Anything on Chen? She said. Gannett folded the paper. He's clean. No financial irregularities. No property outside his house in Rockland. No connections to the Aldrich Kays that I could find, other than the campaign donations. His wife was a distant cousin. 40 years ago. That's not a connection. That's a footnote. Nora sat down at her desk. Gordon had a file on the boatyard fire. A handwritten statement saying Thomas Aldrich Kay started it, and Arthur Chen helped cover it up. Gannett raised an eyebrow. You found that in the locker? In the locker, with Gordon's signature on the investigation report. Gordon signed the report. That means he was in on the cover-up too. I know. Nora leaned back in her chair. So why did he keep the evidence? Why did he save it? Insurance, like Dot said. Gannett shrugged. Gordon was a politician. Politicians keep leverage. Then someone found out about the file. Someone threatened to expose him, and Gordon was going to confront that person. Or that person confronted him. Nora nodded. In the garden, the night he died. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Nora stood up and put on her coat. Where are you going? Gannett said. To talk to Arthur Chen. Before the roads get any worse. It's snowing. Nora, I noticed. She walked out into the cold and drove toward Rockland. Chapter 9. Certainty. Arthur Chen lived in a white colonial on a quiet street in Rockland, 15 miles south of Stillwater Cove. The house was larger than Nora had expected, with a wraparound porch and a 3-car garage. A judge's salary, even after 20 years, did not usually buy a house like this. Nora parked across the street and sat in her car for a moment, watching the lights in the windows. The snow was falling harder now, the flakes thick and wet, and the temperature had dropped again. Her breath fogged the windshield. She had called ahead. Chen said he would be home. He sounded calm, unsurprised. Nora crossed the street and knocked on the door. Chen answered wearing a cardigan sweater and slippers. He was 74, tall and thin, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now just dignified. He looked at Nora for a long moment, then stepped back. Come in, Deputy. It's cold out there. The house was warm, almost too warm, and it smelled like coffee and old books. Chen led Nora to a study at the back of the house, a room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a fire burning in the fireplace. He gestured to a chair. Chen sat across from her in a leather armchair that looked like it had been there for decades. You have questions, he said. I do. About Gordon? About Gordon. And about the boatyard fire in 1983. Chen's face did not change. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, steady and still. I was wondering when someone would ask about that, he said. Gordon kept a file in a locked box in the town hall basement, a handwritten statement saying the fire was arson, that Thomas Aldrich Kay started it, that you helped cover it up. Chen was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. The wind rattled the windows. The statement is true, he said. Thomas Aldrich Kay started that fire. He was 16 years old, drunk and stupid. He dropped a lantern in the storage shed and ran. And you covered it up. I helped cover it up. Yes? Chen looked at the fire. The Aldrich Kays were the most powerful family in the county. They had money. They had lawyers. They had connections in Augusta. If Thomas had been charged, they would have fought it. They would have tied it up in court for years, and in the end, a 16-year-old boy from a wealthy family would have gotten probation, maybe community service. So you let him walk. We let him walk. And the Fenn family lost their business, and Eleanor Fenn spent 40 years blaming everyone in sight. Chen's voice was flat. I have lived with that decision every day for 4 decades. I am not proud of it. Did Gordon feel the same way? Gordon felt that the truth would have done more harm than good. He believed in stability, in protecting the town from itself. Chen paused. He was wrong, but he believed it. Who else knew about the cover-up? Just the 3 of us. Me, Gordon, and the Aldrich Kay family attorney. The attorney handled the payment to the fire marshal's office. Payment? A donation to the state fire marshal's retirement fund, in exchange for a favorable report. Chen's jaw tightened. I did not know about the payment until after it was done. Gordon handled that part. Nora wrote this down. A donation. A bribe dressed up as something else. Someone found out, Nora said. Recently. Someone started asking questions about the boatyard. Eleanor Fenn. She's been asking for 40 years. But someone else, too. Someone who knew where to look. Who? Chen was quiet again. He picked up a poker and stirred the fire, though it did not need stirring. Harriet Baines, he said, the town clerk. She came to me 6 months ago. She said she had found something in Gordon's files. Something about the boatyard. She wanted to know what to do with it. What did you tell her? I told her to leave it alone, that some things were better left in the past. Chen set down the poker. She did not listen. Did she confront Gordon? She confronted him. She threatened to go to the state attorney general if he did not come clean about the boatyard. Chen looked at Nora. Gordon was terrified, not of the truth, of what it would do to the town, to the people who had been hurt. He had spent 40 years protecting a secret that should never have been kept. Was Harriet the person he was going to confront the night he died? I don't know. He didn't tell me. But you were at the meeting that night. You saw him. I saw him. He looked terrible. Tired. Scared. I asked him if he was all right. He said he would be. After tonight. After he talked to Harriet. After he talked to whoever he needed to talk to. Chen folded his hands. I did not go to the garden that night. Deputy, I went home. My wife will confirm it. Did anyone else go to the garden? I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would guess Barry Marsh. He was in town. He was angry. He had been drinking. Chen paused. And he had access to Gordon's house. He could have taken the coat. He could have taken the key. The key to the locker? Gordon kept a key to the locker in his desk. Barry knew where it was. He had been in that office many times. Nora wrote this down. Barry could have taken the key. Barry could have gone to the garden. Barry could have argued with Gordon on the path. But Barry had been in the woods, not on the path. He had seen Gordon arguing with someone else, a tall man in a dark coat. Arthur Chen was tall, 6'2". He had been at the meeting that night. He had left through the front. But he could have circled back. He could have met Gordon on the path. Where were you between 8 and 9? Nora said. Driving home. It takes 45 minutes. My wife called me at 8:30 to ask if I wanted dinner. Can she confirm that? She can. And the phone records will too. Nora wrote this down. Chen had an alibi. A solid one. She stood up. Thank you for your time. Judge. Chen stood too. He walked her to the door. Deputy, he said. Gordon was not a perfect man, but he was not a murderer. He was not a thief. He was a man who made a bad decision 40 years ago and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. He kept the evidence. He could have come forward at any time. He could have, but he was afraid. We both were. Chen opened the door. The truth has a cost. Sometimes it's higher than people are willing to pay. Nora walked out into the snow. She drove back to Stillwater Cove with the wipers struggling against the falling snow. The roads were bad now, the plows not keeping up, and she took the turns slowly. She needed to think. Chen had a solid alibi. He was driving home at the time of the argument. His wife confirmed it. The phone records would confirm it. Harriet had been on the path. She admitted it. She had seen Gordon arguing with a tall man in a dark coat. Barry had been in the woods. He had seen the same thing. The tall man was not Barry. Barry was not tall. He was 5'9". The tall man was not Harriet. Harriet was a woman. The tall man was not Celia. Celia was also a woman. The tall man was not Arthur Chen. Chen had an alibi. Who else was tall? Who else had been at the town hall that night? Who else had access to Gordon's house? Who else had a reason to want Gordon dead? Nora ran through the list. Andrew Marsh, Gordon's brother. Tall, 6'2". He had been at the meeting. He had left through the front. He had driven back to Portland. But Magnus said his car was gone at 11. Andrew could have circled back. He could have met Gordon on the path. He could have argued with him. And Andrew had motive. If Gordon restructured the trust fund, Barry would inherit. Andrew would not. Andrew would lose control of the family money. Nora pulled over and called the Seabird Inn. Magnus, did Andrew Marsh check out the morning after Gordon died? Yes, 9 o'clock. He paid in cash. Did he say where he was going? No, but he looked tired, like he hadn't slept. Nora thanked him and hung up. Andrew Marsh had been in Stillwater Cove that night. He had been at the meeting. He had left the inn at some point, Magnus did not know when, and his car was gone at 11. He could have been on the path. He could have argued with Gordon. He could have drugged Gordon's coffee at dinner, then followed him to the garden. But Andrew had not been at Gordon's house for dinner. He had been at the inn. Someone else had drugged Gordon. Someone at the house. Barry, or Celia, or Margaret. Nora started the car and drove to Gordon's house. Margaret answered the door in her bathrobe. She looked older than she had a few days ago, the grief settling deeper into her face. Deputy, it's late. I know. I have a few more questions. Margaret stepped back. Nora followed her to the living room. The night Gordon died, Nora said. Who else was in the house? You already know. Barry, Celia, me. Did anyone leave the house between dinner and the meeting? Margaret thought about it. Celia left first, around 7:30. She said she needed to get something from her car. Was Gordon still there? Yes, he was in the living room, going over his notes for the meeting. Did Celia come back? She came back about 10 minutes later. She had a coat with her. Gordon's coat, I thought. But it was hers. She gave it to him. The one he was wearing when he died. I suppose so. Margaret paused. Gordon thanked her. He said it was warmer than his. Did anyone else leave? Barry went out to the garden around the same time. He said he needed air. Did you see him come back? No, but I heard him. He came in through the back door around 8:30. I was in the kitchen. I heard the door close. Nora wrote this down. Barry had been in the garden before Gordon left for the meeting. He could have been the tall man Harriet saw. But Barry was not tall. Unless Harriet had misjudged the height, in the dark, in the snow. Thank you. Margaret. Nora drove home in the snow, her mind turning over the pieces. Barry had been in the garden. Barry had access to Gordon's house. Barry had a motive. Barry had lied about his alibi. But Barry had also been in the woods, watching. He had seen Gordon arguing with someone else, a tall man in a dark coat. Andrew Marsh was tall. Andrew had been in town. Andrew had a motive. But Andrew had not been at the house. He could not have drugged Gordon's coffee. Unless someone else had done it for him. Nora pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, the engine running, the heater blowing warm air. She needed to talk to Barry again. She needed to push him, hard, and she needed to find out where Andrew Marsh had been between 8 and 9. The snow was falling faster now. The roads were getting worse. But Nora was not going to sleep tonight. Not until she knew. She picked up her phone and called Barry. No answer. She left a message. Then she called Gannett. I need a warrant for Andrew Marsh's phone records. You're not going to get it tonight, Nora. It's after 9 and there's a snowstorm. Then get it tomorrow morning. First thing. What did you find? I found the thread. I just need to pull it. She hung up and went inside. The cottage was dark and cold. The boiler was still not working. Nora built a fire and sat on the floor in front of it, Beckett in her lap. She had the evidence. She had the timeline. She had the motive. She just needed the confession, and she knew how to get it. Chapter 10. The Memorial Service. The Stillwater Cove Town Hall had never looked so full. Every pew in the main hall was occupied. The selectmen sat in the front row, their faces solemn. Margaret Marsh sat between her sister and her minister, her hands folded in her lap. Barry was in the row behind her, staring at the floor. Nora stood at the back of the hall, watching the room. The memorial service for Gordon Marsh had been planned quickly. The Reverend Elaine Marsh, no relation, officiated with the practiced grace of someone who had done this too many times. She spoke of Gordon's service to the town, his dedication, his stubbornness, his love for Stillwater Cove. The people listened. Some cried. Most just sat, their faces closed, their thoughts private. Nora was not there to mourn. She was there to watch. The service lasted 45 minutes. At the end, Reverend Marsh asked if anyone would like to speak. A few people stood. Colleagues, neighbors, old friends. They told stories about Gordon, his humor, his temper, his habit of showing up at the diner at exactly the same time every day. Then Reverend Marsh looked at Nora. "Deputy Alcott," she said, "would you like to say a few words?" Nora walked to the front of the hall. She did not go to the podium. She stood in the center of the aisle, where everyone could see her. "I'm not here to speak about Gordon Marsh's life," Nora said. "I'm here to speak about his death." The room went still. The medical examiner ruled Gordon's death as exposure, hypothermia. He died of cold on a January night in the garden behind his house. She paused. She looked at the faces in the crowd. Margaret, pale and tear-streaked. Barry, his jaw tight. Harriet, her hands clenched in her lap. Celia, watching with an expression Nora could not read. But Gordon did not die of natural causes, Nora said. Someone drugged him. Someone put a sedative in his food or drink, enough to make him drowsy, enough to make him confused. A murmur ran through the room. Someone followed him to the garden that night. Someone argued with him on the path. And when Gordon collapsed from the cold, someone did not help him. Someone left him there to freeze. Nora pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. Gordon knew he was in danger. 2 weeks before he died, he wrote a letter. He put it in his office safe, addressed to me. In that letter, he named the person he was planning to confront. She unfolded the paper. She did not look at it. She had memorized the words. The person I am about to confront is someone this town trusts, someone who has been in positions of authority for years, someone who will not go quietly. Nora looked up. She scanned the room. Gordon was going to confront Harriet Baines about embezzling from the Capital Improvement Fund. Harriet's face went white. The people around her turned to stare. But Harriet did not kill him, Nora said. She was on the path that night. She saw Gordon arguing with someone else, a tall man in a dark coat. She let that sit for a moment. Barry Marsh was also on the path that night. He was in the woods, watching. He saw the same thing, a tall man in a dark coat arguing with Gordon. Barry's head snapped up. His eyes were wide. Barry did not kill his uncle. He was drunk and angry and scared, but he did not kill him. He called his girlfriend at 9:02 and asked her to lie for him. He lied about his alibi because he was afraid of how it would look. But he did not kill Gordon. Nora turned to face the front row. The tall man in the dark coat was someone who had been at the town hall that night, someone who left through the front door and circled back through the woods, someone who had access to Gordon's house, someone who had a reason to want Gordon dead. She looked at Andrew Marsh. Andrew sat in the front row, between his wife and his son. He was tall, 6'2". He was wearing a dark coat. Andrew Marsh, Nora said. Gordon's brother. The room erupted. People turned, whispered, pointed. Andrew's face did not change. Andrew was at the meeting that night, Nora continued. He left through the front door at 8:01. He drove toward Portland, but he did not go home. His car was seen at the Seabird Inn at 11, but Magnus Torkel locked up at 11, and Andrew's car was gone. Andrew had been out that night. Andrew stood up. His wife grabbed his arm. "I have nothing to say to this," Andrew said. "You don't have to say anything," Nora said. "But I have something to say to you." She pulled out her phone and read from the screen. "Your phone records show that you called Gordon at 9:15 on the night he died. The call lasted 2 minutes. Gordon's phone was found in his coat pocket. The last call he received was from you." Andrew's face went pale. "You argued with Gordon on the path," Nora said. "You argued about the trust fund, about the boatyard, about 40 years of secrets, and when Gordon collapsed, you walked away." "I did not. You walked away and left him to die." The room was silent. Even the people who had been whispering had stopped. Andrew looked at Nora. His eyes were wet. "I didn't mean for him to die," he said. "He was my brother." "Then why did you leave him?" Andrew sat down. He put his head in his hands. "He was going to tell everyone," Andrew said. "About the boatyard, about the cover-up, about the money. He was going to ruin everything." "So you drugged him." "I put something in his coffee. At dinner, just enough to make him tired. I thought if he was tired, he would go home. He would sleep. He would forget." But he didn't forget. No. He went to the garden. He waited for me. He knew I had done it. He knew everything. Andrew looked up at Nora. His face was wet with tears. "I followed him out there." We argued. He started listing all the things I had done, the money I had taken, the people I had hurt, and then he just stopped. He sat down in the snow. He closed his eyes. "And you walked away?" "I thought he was resting. I thought he would get up and go home." Andrew's voice cracked. "I didn't know he wouldn't get up." Nora looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the room. "Andrew Marsh, you are under arrest for the murder of Gordon Marsh." She pulled out her handcuffs. The room was silent as she crossed to the front row and took Andrew by the arm. He did not resist. He stood up, held out his hands, and let her cuff him. Barry was staring at his father, his face a mask of disbelief. Margaret was crying. Harriet was as white as the snow outside. Nora led Andrew down the aisle and out of the town hall. The cold hit her face like a slap. The snow was still falling, thick and wet, covering the parking lot in a fresh layer of white. She put Andrew in the back of her car and closed the door. Then she leaned against the hood and took a breath. The memorial service had ended. The truth had come out, and Gordon Marsh could finally rest. The drive to the station took 15 minutes. Andrew did not speak. He sat in the back seat with his head down, his cuffed hands in his lap. Nora booked him in the holding cell. Gannett arrived an hour later, brushing snow from his coat. "You actually did it," he said. "I actually did it," At the memorial service? In front of everyone? It was F6, Nora said. Public moment. The reveal happens in a community setting. It worked. Gannett shook his head. Here's something else. Nora, I'm just doing my job. She sat down at her desk and pulled out her notebook. The case was closed. The killer was in custody. The evidence was solid. But she did not feel triumphant. She felt tired and cold. The boiler at the cottage was still not working. She would have to call the repairman again tomorrow. But tonight, she would build a fire. She would sit on the floor with Beckett. She would let herself rest. She picked up her phone and called the repair service. Tomorrow morning, the dispatcher said. First thing, I promise. Nora hung up and put on her coat. I'm going home, she said. Gannett nodded. Get some sleep. You've earned it. She walked out into the snow and drove home. The cottage was dark. Beckett was on the couch, curled into a ball, his tail wrapped around his nose. He looked up when Nora came in, then closed his eyes and went back to sleep. Nora built a fire. She sat on the floor in front of it, her back against the couch, her feet stretched toward the flames. The case was over. Gordon Marsh was dead. His brother was in jail. The truth about the boatyard would come out now. 40 years too late. She thought about Arthur Chen, sitting in his study, living with his guilt. She thought about Harriet Baines, who had embezzled money to pay for her mother's medical bills. She thought about Celia Holt, who had worn her resentment like a coat for 11 years. None of them had killed Gordon, but all of them had contributed to his death. The secrets, the lies, the things people did to protect themselves. Nora leaned her head back against the couch and closed her eyes. Beckett stirred. He stood up, stretched, and jumped down onto her lap. He settled into the hollow of her legs and started to purr. Nora put her hand on his back and felt the warmth of him through her palm. The fire crackled. The wind rattled the windows. The snow kept falling. And for a moment, the world was quiet. That's all from Stillwater Cove for tonight. Nora will be back soon. Until then, stay curious and stay warm. The truth does not always set you free. Sometimes it only shows you how long you have been living in a cage of your own making.